Hey, John Wesley. Bobby asked me if I wanted the boy band Justin Bieber microphone or the one on the shirt, so I decided to go with the one on the shirt. It looks a lot different here. I knew it was going on, that there was some construction, but it's really nice, so I know it's probably been a lot of stress and work that's gone into it, but objectively I think it looks great. So the pews are comfortable. Don't get seated there too long because we won't be in here long, I promise. Hey, look, times are tough, right? I'll avoid any political comment that might make somebody uncomfortable. Chick-fil-A used to cost $6 for a meal, now it's $12. It's $100 to fill up a tank of gas in your truck. But another way to measure it is y'all asked me to stand up here this morning. So times are real tough. You talk about scraping the bottom of a barrel. I am not Brad. I'm not a preacher, but I'll do my best. I'm probably a little over-nervous and underprepared, so y'all just hold on tight, okay? I do say this. I think it's great that we're doing a meal, but I will tell you, I think we have probably missed an opportunity to be the first church to the steakhouse. So it's okay. It's okay. So it's homecoming. You think about going home. What does that mean to you, right? We've lived in Athens for a little over a decade, like Ryan said. We love it there. Okay, that's home. But this is home to me, right? This will always be home. I've always loved Moulton. I've always loved this church. I was not that kid, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I wasn't that kid in high school that was just anxious to get far, far away. I love North Alabama. I wanted to be back up here, and we've been blessed to be here. So home comes with memories, right? It's homecoming. We got memories, and I'll share a couple of funny memories specifically in this church. You'll be shocked to know the first bone I ever broke was right here. We had a lock-in. I was acting like a moron, trying to impress some of the older guys, I think, misjudged the stage, caught my foot, limped all the way home, walked on it for a little while, finally got it x-rayed, it was broken. I have a confession to make. I'm 37 years old. I've got 2 kids, a beautiful wife, I'm a grown man, and I'm still a little scared to go in that basement. Anybody else? Is it just me? Is it just me? That basement's a creepy spot. Speaking of the basement, who remembers, it's a long, long time ago now, but who remembers we used to do a Halloween haunted house in there? Who's still scarred because of John Holley running a live chainsaw with a crazy mask on? Allegedly there was no blade, but I think it got canceled after that year. I remember VBS. My mom would get super involved with VBS and the skits and watching people like Ryan and others that age and older, and the snacks. I don't know, it's the same snacks you eat at the house, but for some reason when they put it on a VBS tray, that's my memories, the skits and the snacks. I could keep going, that's not the point. I know it may not be this way for everybody, I'm sensitive to that, but for a lot of us, and probably most of us, when we think of home, it comes with comfort, good memories, a place of refuge. So, a biblical example of going home, it's easy to talk about the prodigal son, and that's not what I'm going to talk about this morning, but for those that are unfamiliar with the story, the father has 2 sons, the youngest thinks he knows better, takes his inheritance early, goes off, squanders it over a couple of years, and just comes begging to be back, just to be a slave. Just let me be your servant. And the father meets him with complete grace and just joy. It's pretty applicable to us. So the transition here is, where is our home as Christians? Well, it's heaven. What better way to celebrate homecoming than to talk about our heavenly home? It's something that we acknowledge frequently. I mean, it's implied about heaven, but we don't. I've gone to church my whole life. We don't routinely talk about heaven in any detail, at least not in my experience. So this morning, I am not an expert on anything, for that matter. I'm not even good at physical therapy. But we are going to talk about heaven this morning. And so I need to give credit to the late Jim Brinkerhoff for his Imagine series. You can find all this on, I think it's jimbrink.org. He has so many good sermons that he recorded, but his Imagine series talks a lot about heaven, so I won't do as well as he did, but I borrowed some of his thoughts. And this was Sarah's nudging me in the in this direction. So if it's not good, it's her fault. Okay, it's not my fault. So let's imagine heaven, our promised home. We've heard forever that heaven's more beautiful and perfect than we could ever imagine, and that's accurate. Okay, our earthly minds cannot fully comprehend heaven. I know that, but let's set aside that being an excuse to not try. You think about this quote, you can only desire what you can imagine. So I think it's important that we try to imagine heaven so that we can desire to be there with our Creator one day. Outside of Jesus, there are two people that have seen heaven and lived to tell about it. Paul reluctantly mentions heaven in 2 Corinthians 12, verses 3 through 4. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was called up to paradise and heard inexpressible things, things that no one is permitted to tell. In other words, he wasn't permitted to tell. It's interesting, though, 40 to 50 years later, John receives a vision and is commanded to tell. And I've pieced this together from Revelation 21. This will be a bit of a longer reading. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared. And the sea was also gone, and I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of the heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. So he took me in the Spirit to a great high mountain. He showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God and sparkled like a precious stone, like jasper as clear as crystal. The city wall was broad and high, with 12 gates guarded by 12 angels. And the names of the 12 tribes of Israel were written on the gates. There were 3 gates on each side, east, north, south, and west. The wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were written the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The angel who talked to me held in his hand a gold measuring stick to measure the city, its gates, and its wall. When he measured it, he found it was a square as wide as it was long. In fact, its length and width and height were about 12,000 stadia. That's about 1,400 miles. Then he measured the walls and found them to be 216 feet thick, according to the human standard used by the angel. A lot to take in, a lot to appreciate there. But let's start first with imagining the magnitude and then the community of heaven. Over 15 times in Revelation 21 and 22, heaven is referred to as a city. Some might argue, and I don't want to argue, I'm not in a position to, that a lot of this is metaphorical. But for this morning, we're going to take it at face value, okay? It's a massive place. There is a cicada back there, by the way. It was attacking somebody when we walked in and flew up and tried to get me, and I athletically swatted it away. 1,400 miles long by wide by tall. That, for reference, that's roughly Canada to Mexico, Johnson City, Tennessee, I guess for y'all be over here, Johnson City, Tennessee to Denver, Colorado. It's massive. It's really kind of hard to fathom. I mean, we know those places, but it's hard to imagine that being one city. Whether figurative or not, the implication is this is not intended to be a place for a few. There's room for everyone. It's huge. God wants us all to be there. Heaven, like other cities, will be a place of beauty and architecture is hard for us to comprehend. I think about New York City. Okay, I grew up here. I think our tallest building is the courthouse. Okay, that's a beautiful structure. Don't get me wrong. I've always liked the courthouse. But then you go to Manhattan, and your back and neck is sore from taking in all the architecture and just the magnitude of the city. Well, try to imagine heaven on an exponentially greater scale than that, or any other city you've been impressed with, but without the murder, the robbery, the homelessness that tend to bring us back down to earth that are associated with our large cities. Another thing you may have noticed is the structure of the city is a perfect cube. What's the only other place in the Bible that's built as a cube? Well, it's in the temple. It's the innermost part of the temple is the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. That's where God resided himself. And the implication here is that in heaven, the entire city is holy. God will literally be living there with us and amongst us. Revelation 21:3 says, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be them as their God." Guys, I understand that's hard to comprehend. There's a gap between us and God now. We communicate through prayer, and I understand that he speaks to all of us in different ways. But trying to imagine him living amongst us It's hard to do. I understand that, but it's kind of incredible. Consider the sense of community in heaven. So Sarah and I live in a neighborhood. We have friends nearby. There's kids all over the place. And that sense of community, I'm sure, the church can be a sense of community. We have the same thing in Athens. And regardless, you have your own sense of community, and it helps the low times not be so low, and it helps the high times be even higher. Imagine what our sense of community will be like in heaven when we're surrounded by our Creator and people that we love. Let's talk a little bit about the security of heaven. Why does a place like this need walls that are 1,400 miles tall? Well, it doesn't. God's already won. There's no sequel to the devil having a resurgence. God has won. The battle is over. Let's take the walls as a statement of God's commitment to protecting His people. Revelation 21:5 tells us that the gates will never be closed because there is no night. No needs for security because God has permanently destroyed His enemies. What does that mean? When you think about it, we'll finally be able to, you talk about heaven and it's under this construct of time and days like only we can imagine. I would suspect it will be different, but we're doing the best we can. But we're able to function every day without what? Worry. Consider that for a second. How often does worry creep in and steal your happy moments? You're having a great day or trying to experience something that's special to you, and then it's a financial concern. It's a family issue, something at work. Worry and fear steals your joy. There's no more of that in heaven. How will that change how we interact with God? Right now, a lot of our communication, God, is need-oriented. I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with that. In fact, we're commanded to take what's on our heart to God. But right now, it's need-oriented and it's driven by fear and worry. A lot of our communication with our Creator is driven by fear and worry as it stands today. Well, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what He wants. But with worry being gone, how incredible do you think it would be to communicate with our Creator? Nothing but thankfulness, joy, and love. Next, we'll look at the beauty of heaven. This may be the hardest to comprehend, really. Revelation 21:18-21 says, "The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold. Like clear glass, the foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, and the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass." Look, outside of this scripture, I don't know if I even have heard of half of those jewels. I'm not a jewelry guy. But regardless, you can appreciate that we'll be able to take in all this beautiful creation, and it surrounds us, and there won't be the greed and envy associated with it that we have today. Let's think, for instance, I like to be out in nature. Okay, I like to hunt. Some of the best parts of hunting is even if you don't see anything, you get to sit out in the woods and watch the sun come up, and it's peaceful. Going for a walk in the neighborhood or out on a nature trail, and you take in this creation. Earth is beautiful. Okay, it's a beautiful, beautiful creation. Again, on an exponential scale, heaven will be that much greater. We'll be able to appreciate God's creation, like I said, without the greed and envy associated with. Right now, we have jewelry that's insured and behind lock and key or under security, and we'll be there to be surrounded with these things that now we covet, but it will surround us there, and there will be none of that. John also implies there will be some restoration of the Garden of Eden in heaven. In chapter 22 of Revelation, verses 1 and 2, he says, "Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of the life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nation." You remember that God originally designed us from the garden, we were originally designed to live with Him in paradise. But because of the events in the Garden of Eden, when Satan got a foothold with Eve and then Adam, we've lived in a fallen creation. In heaven, God will have restored His original intention for us. The beauty is difficult to imagine, but you think about it, everything that we call beautiful was created by our Creator, and He will be living amongst us. Heaven's going to be a beautiful place. I realize this is not overly deep, and it is difficult. I've been preparing for a little while. It's difficult to wrap your head around heaven and try to grasp the magnitude of heaven, much less being there eternally. What's the point? So what's the point? God wants us to come home. Think about all this beauty and effort He's put into creating this place for us. That should be a statement within itself of how much He desires us to be there. We're not designed for this fallen creation. It's important to remember that God, He doesn't need us. He wants us. The descriptions of heaven in Revelation, it should inspire hope. A lot of negative now. A lot of bad days. A lot of how are we going to get out of this thoughts, whether it's through the country or just your personal life. Heaven is something you can long for and look forward to that should inspire hope. Jesus' words in John 14, verses 1 through 3 say, "Let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." He wants to take us home. Think back to the prodigal son in Luke 15. Our God is the father figure in that parable, waiting anxiously for us to return to Him. In Matthew 5:8, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." We're not perfect. You will never earn heaven. But by God's grace, it will be granted to us. If this morning you feel like you're not on that narrow path to meeting our Creator there one day, why? Why wait and turning that around? If you're in the audience, you're not a Christian, and you want to understand more about what that means, or you know what it means and you're ready to make a step today, we can help you. So I hope this morning, if you have something on your heart, let this church help you with that. Come now as we sing.